Hey guys, welcome into Believe in Eagles. I'm your host, Lee Mayock, and as per usual, I'm here with my dad, Mike Mayock. Dad, I like your hat. The melon hat got there?
It got there, and I don't know when it got there because we just got to Georgia yesterday, and there was this package on the doorstep, and I was like, I wonder if that's my hat. So,
Are you obsessed with it?
Mandy, yeah, it's like we opened it up, and Mandy put hers on, I put mine on. It was awesome. These are pretty cool. Like on the inside, they're really nice.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks good. If you want more of them, it's melon.com, MELIN. But I feel like you're going to love that in Georgia too, being like indoor, outdoor. Perfect for you.
Yes, 100%. Thank you, dear.
All right. Before we get into Eagles, I need to talk betting with you guys. As always, our show is brought to you by Bet Online. And you can go to Bet Online today and use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. It continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. I think we all hit some good bets last week, NFL Week 18, with all those incentives. Most of those people hit their incentives, so I hope you followed my advice and pretty much everyone else on the internet's advice on taking those incentives. This week is so different, and that's why I wanted to touch on it. I'm so scared of any of the bets. Nothing in the playoffs, the wild card weekend, nothing goes how you think it's going to go. And so I don't even know what I'm going to take yet. I just know what I'm not going to touch, and that's what I'm going to tell you guys. I am not with a 10-foot pole am I going to touch the Steelers-Ravens game. I know you shouldn't bet against Lamar Jackson, but he doesn't have Zay Flowers, and that divisional matchup of Steelers-Ravens, I feel can go either way anytime. And an angry Mike Tomlin scares me, especially when his defense has been playing like crap. I just don't believe that it could continue to play like crap again. So the money line is Ravens, and people are saying that that's the easy bet to take, and I just wouldn't touch it. So that is my betting advice to you all this week. What do you think, Dad?
I actually kind of like that because I know Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh both pretty well. And between them, they've got about 35 years excuse me.
Bless you.
Excuse me. They've got
3. Do you need another sneeze? You usually do 3. Are you holding it in?
I'm trying to hold it in here. Tomlin's been there like 18 plus or minus. Harbs has been there like 17. They know each other so well. And to your point, especially with Zay Flowers out, which is kind of the X factor when you try to load the box against Lamar, like who's going to cover that dude? Because he's so explosive. So I'm with you that I think the Ravens are a better football team, but it's the kind of game where you wouldn't be surprised if Mikey T shows up. And, the Steelers have played really well against the Ravens historically. So I think it's a smart non-pick.
Yeah, non-bet.
Yep.
Wow, surprised you agreed with me. Okay, so let's get into Eagles first and foremost. That's what we're here to do, and it is the NFC Wildcard playoff game, Packers versus Eagles. And so, let's go a little throwback to.
Now, did I tell you that I did a radio hit in Philly yesterday while I was in the car, and they introduced me as Believe in Eagles and Lee Mayock?
You did, like my co-host, my guest?
Yeah, I'm your guest. Yes. Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool.
Did you feel like you've fallen a long way from being introduced as a GM, and now you're just the Believe in Eagles podcast host?
No, I'm
shout out WIP. Thanks, guys, for that.
Exactly. I'm your guest. I think it's anytime you can get put in a position with your daughter like that. It's really, for a dad, it's really cool.
That is shocking to me because I had to beg you to do this.
I'm enjoying it. I'm getting more time with my daughter, and it's kind of cool that at my age I come on to do a WIP hit, and they introduce me as Believe in Eagles, Mike Mayock, who does it with a podcast with his daughter Lee, and I think that's really kind of cool.
That's funny.
Yeah,
only in Philly.
It's Philly, and yeah. Yep.
Okay, so NFL Week 2, the Eagles were in Brazil I think it was week
Nope.
2, right? They were, what, week 1?
Yep.
It was week 1, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. One of those weeks. They were in Brazil, and they were playing the Packers.
Yep.
And, it was week 1. It was week 1. And the Eagles ended up beating the Packers in Brazil, like 34-29. What has changed with both teams since then?
I think the biggest change for both teams is the arrival of Vic Fangio for the Eagles. And, that a year ago right now, Lee, this team was in disarray. They were in the middle of that losing streak.
Yeah.
They were on their way to Tampa to lose a wild card game at Tampa, and they got spanked. It was ugly. Philadelphia was exploding.
You hated that game so much.
I really didn't like that game. So in comes this old guy named Vic Fangio, who's got a scheme, and even better, he knows how to teach the scheme, because it's not important what's in Vic's head. It's important what is in all his players' head. In other words, can they process what Vic wants them to process? So I think Vic and his staff have done an amazing job. So I think the defense that's on the field now is completely different than the defense that took the field in Brazil and the team that went on the bye week after week 4 and they were 2-2. It's a combination of a lot of talent, a great scheme, and they're well coached. And that's why they're number 2 overall in points allowed. They're really good. And I think that's the biggest difference for either team, is that the Eagles defense is better, way better.
Okay, then what about the Packers? What has gone on for them this season? What have they gotten better in? What have they gotten worse in? What are you seeing? And I mean, and obviously Jordan Love, he's a little injured, but
what I like about Green Bay is they're a balanced team. Okay, and they're in the toughest division in football. You win 11 games and you come in 3rd place, because of Detroit and Minnesota having historic years. They're really balanced on offense. They're balanced on defense. They're solid pass and run. I think the biggest difference in them as time came on, they signed Josh Jacobs, who you and I know, right?
And he's killing it.
But I think people were like, they've been a pass first kind of team. Is Josh, what's Josh going to do? And I think they've done a really good job of establishing him as really kind of what they are, what their identity is on offense. And if the Eagles let Josh get a little sniff of a big day, watch out, because Josh is a baller, and if there are 5 top running backs in the league that I think are special, I mean high level special, he's one of the 5. And
you did draft him.
What's that?
You did draft him.
We drafted him, and what's cool about this game is you've got Saquon and Josh. You got 2 of those 5 dudes in the same game. So I think from an Eagles perspective, when you say what's the identity, they can beat you. They got a bunch of good wideouts. They have good tight ends. They have a solid line. The quarterback is one of those guys that should be ascending. But at the end of the day, the biggest worry for the Eagles, I think, is if Josh Jacobs and Green Bay can control the line of scrimmage on the ground, limit Eagles' possessions offensively, and make it a lower scoring game, I think that goes into Green Bay's favor.
Who do you think will start off faster?
It's another good question. The Eagles have struggled kind of, a lot of the year with that first series. Yeah. But here's what I think the big thing is, Lee. If you're an Eagles fan, right? I think the biggest thing is just you have more talent. You're well coached. You ought to win this football game. Just don't get outside of your character, your identity, just because it's a playoff game. In other words, Jalen Hurts, what a great job he's done taking care of the football. Don't try to be Superman. Just get the ball out on time. Don't turn it over. Let your offensive line do what they do. Let Saquon do what he does. Get the ball out on time to 11 and 6 because they're both special. Just be who you are. You don't have to be anybody different. And if you don't turn the ball over and you do who you are on all three phases, they're going to be fine.
But speaking of Jalen Hurts and like playing his own game, do you think that they're going to have to adjust for him just clearing concussion protocol? Like, do you think they're going to have to change that at all?
Yeah, you and I talked about that a little bit last week, and I told you that as long as he gets a full week of practice, I'm comfortable, and he's going to get a full week of practice. So I think you're going to get a well-rested, eager, excited Jalen Hurts. I just don't want him to be too excited. Like I heard Lamar Jackson. I read something he said the other day because Lamar has struggled in the playoffs. Lamar is 2-4 as a starter in the playoffs. And he said, I get too excited. I got to calm down a little bit. And so that's kind of what I'm saying about Lamar. Just baseline, which I think he is. Just baseline. Play your normal game. And I think the Eagles are going to be fine. And I'm not worried about the concussion protocol situation.
Okay, and just to stick with injuries for a second, A.J. Brown, I guess they've been resting him a bit for his knee. Do you think that's just an over-precautious thing to do, or are you worried about that at all, or what's up?
Yeah, I'm not worried about that, but I'm not in the building. I'm sure. I think it's smart at this time of year. You're playing 17 games. The Eagles got a chance to rest a bunch of people a week ago, which I thought was really smart by Nick. And that whole Saquon Barkley and trying to get the rushing record, which people were enamored with. And I thought if he got the record, be amazing, but you can't take that chance. So the A.J. Browns, the guys that are beat up and hurt, give them as much rest as they need. At this time of year, those guys know what they need to do to get their bodies ready to play on Sunday.
Okay. So, you obviously know Rich Bisaccia very well. And so you have insight into, special teams. What do you think in general, what is going to be their game plan? The Packers, what's going to be their game plan against this Eagles team?
Well, I know that staff really well. Jeff Hafley's the defensive coordinator, and he was the Boston College head coach, and I've known him for years. Their head coach was the Notre Dame quarterback coach when I was doing Notre Dame games, and I sat in a bunch of meeting rooms with him and his quarterbacks. So, and half the other coaches I've known for 20 years. So what I know about Green Bay is they're really well coached. They're not going to give anything to the Eagles. They're not going to make it easy. And like we talked about a minute ago, I think the key for them is just trying to control the football. I think that's going to be their game plan is limit possessions, get Josh Jacobs rolling. If the Eagles try to take away Josh Jacobs and, Vic likes a too high shell and you don't want to hear all that kind of stuff.
No, I do. Tell me what.
Well, no, Vic plays kind of like a two shell a lot and wants to stop the run with one less person in the box because there's a lot of talent up front for the Eagles. But if you can't stop Josh with one less person in the box, you're going to have to drop safeties down and do some things. And if you do that, then it opens up the pass game a little bit. Okay. So it's going to be a little bit of a chess match early on with the Packers offense and the Eagles defense. Like, okay, how are you going to treat us on first down with Josh? Are you going to try and drop 8 guys down and stop Josh, or are you going to leave 2 back? And so I think it'll be really interesting to see how that progresses. And then the other side of it is the Eagles offense versus the Packers defense.
Right.
And again, the Packers defense is just solid on all 3 levels. I think if you looked at personnel groups on both teams, the Eagles would probably be better at every position. And Green Bay's good, but they'd be better at every position, but except maybe safety. They're good at safety with Xavier McKinney, and they take the ball away with their guys back there. So, again, not to be too simple about it, but I think if the Eagles, their offensive line might be the best in football. They got the best running back in football. They got 2 of the best wideouts. Dallas Goedert is back.
Yeah.
And another weapon.
That's right.
If I just think if they stay balanced and don't turn it over, they're going to win the football game.
Okay. But does it worry you at all when it's almost like a team with everything to lose versus a team with nothing to lose. Like, I just feel like the pressure's on the Eagles big time in this situation.
Why? Because of what happened last year?
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of pressure, and I think it goes back to your point earlier, like how you going to start.
Yeah.
I think those two things tie together, and that's why I keep saying, like, don't get outside yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't score a touchdown or a field goal in your first drive, it's okay. Don't press.
Right.
So I'm not as panicked about this Eagles team. I think they're more centered. I think they're well coached. I think they're loaded with talent. And I keep getting back to oversimplifying, but just do what you do. You're hosting a playoff game at home. Don't put too much pressure on yourselves. And if you just play your normal game, you're going to be hosting another game next week in Philly. So just.
Oh, and I know you hate questions like this, but everyone in Philly is talking about, like, if the Eagles don't make it any further in the playoffs / don't get to the Super Bowl, will Nick Sirianni be in the hot seat?
I have no idea. And that kind of goes to a bunch of different levels of how much success you do or you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they lose the wild card game, people are going to be upset in Philadelphia in general. And I think there'd be a real conversation in the building if they lost this week.
Right.
Like, our talent level is here.
Mm-hmm. The roster, the depth. Yeah.
The talent level's up here. Why are we not getting there in the postseason 2 years in a row? I think that's a fair conversation to have in the building amongst ownership, GM, and the coaches. What are we not doing right? Because we're really talented. We've won a bunch of football games, but Dallas is having that conversation right now, right? The same, except they lost a bunch of games this year. So they're trying to figure out what to do with Mike McCarthy, right? But they won.
Is he not safe? I thought he was safe.
Well, they have until.
But they wait. So can you actually explain this to me? So they blocked Chicago from interviewing with Mike McCarthy, their current head coach. Does that mean that they want him?
It means that his contract is in force until January 14th. Okay. So they control him. They don't have to let him interview with anybody. And they haven't offered him a contract, but they don't want him to do it. So it's Jerry Jones basically saying, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet.
So he's in limbo.
Yeah, till January 14th.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting because if I was Mike McCarthy with a Super Bowl win at Green Bay, 3 consecutive 12-win seasons in Dallas until this year, if I was Mike McCarthy, I'd kind of know that I could go get another head coaching job. And if Jerry don't want me, that's too bad. So I think the longer that goes on, the more Mike probably gets his back up a little bit. Like, I got all these assistant coaches with families. You got to give us a little, what are we doing here? I'd be frustrated. I'd be a little bit frustrated, not just for myself, but for all these people that I brought with me to Dallas to work.
Yeah, it's like trickle down. You feel responsible for that.
It goes way deeper. Yep.
Staying along that line of conversation, did you see that the Raiders fired their head coach and their GM?
No, Lee, did they?
First, so would you have any interest in running it back? Should we go back?
Go back where?
To Vegas.
No, that's not happening, honey.
God, I feel like we should. People don't do that. That would be a fun new thing.
Hey, Lee.
I know. No one asked. No one asked. You need to be asked first. But what if I was just...
Nobody's asking, honey.
What if I were just to pitch us?
Lee? Nobody is asking, honey. It's Mark Davis's team, and he's going to get some help from Tom Brady. And
I was going to say, it sounds like it's going to become very Tom Brady's team. Do you have any idea what you think they're going to do?
I don't.
Like the Ben Johnson name is literally coming up on everyone's search. Do you think that's what Tom's going for?
I don't know what Tom is or isn't going to do, and I think
Mhm.
he's one of the smartest football people that ever lived and one of the hardest working that ever lived. Um, I think the issue for the Raiders is you can talk about any coach you want to talk about, but if you're a prospective head coach for the Raiders, what you want to ask these people is, where's my quarterback? Who's my quarterback? What's the pathway to a quarterback? And right now, they don't have that answer on the roster. So, like if you were Ben Johnson, do you want to go there, or do you want to go to Chicago with Caleb Williams?
Probably
You know what I
Chicago.
mean? I mean, to have any kind of chance of sustained excellence in the NFL, you need a good ownership group.
Mhm.
You need a head coach and GM that are tied at the hip philosophically, and you need a quarterback. And maybe the quarterback's the most important of all of them, right? But so those are the things you need to sustain success over time. And if you're a prospective hot head coach candidate and you don't see a pathway to a quarterback, you can go in there with band-aids. But, if you look at what the Raiders have done the last several years, all they do is fire coaches every 2 years.
And jams.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I use Pittsburgh and Baltimore all the time as my examples of how you run a franchise for sustained excellence over time.
Yep.
And I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 head coaches in like 56 years.
Mm-hmm.
How many head coaches have the Raiders had? They've had the same number of coaches in 5 years, 4 years, whatever it is.
Right.
So and people wonder why, Cleveland was so bad for so many years. And when that new owner came in, Haslam, he was doing the same thing until recently with Stefanski and Burry. And he needs to eat. And to his credit this year, they had a bad year. They had an 11-win season a year ago and a bad season this year. But to their credit, to the owner's credit, he's sticking with the head coach and GM because he believes in them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to give them a chance.
To do their process. Yeah.
It really I was driving down to Georgia yesterday and I heard Clark Hunt, the owner of
Kansas
the Chiefs.
City. Mm-hmm.
He was interviewed on Sirius on one of the shows. And they asked him what he thought an owner's role was. He said, that's a great question. He said, I can't tell Andy what play to call. I can't tell Brett who to draft. I don't know football like they do. But what I can do is hire competent people and then try to give them the resources to succeed.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's a novel conversation. And you got to give them time. So that's why so many teams in the NFL, if you change head coaches and GMs every couple of years, you got no chance to establish a culture. Zero. None.
It seems to me the more an owner is involved, the worse off a franchise is.
Well,
honestly, I know it's a blanket statement, but that's just what I feel.
I think that it's an intriguing conversation because it's one of the few jobs where if you're the owner of an NFL team, you have less product knowledge about your occupation than the people you're hiring.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're at risk a little bit because you made your living, either you inherited a bunch of money or you made your living in a different industry and that's how you made your money. But
right.
You don't. So I think the smart ones like Bisciotti in Baltimore, he comes in and he's a self-made man in a different industry.
Mm-hmm.
He came in and he sat down and they're the ones that hired Harbaugh.
Yep.
And Ozzie Newsome was the GM, and Eric DaCosta was kind of the GM in waiting, and he's now the GM. But I think Bisciotti's done an amazing job because he's smart, he's tough, he demands answers, but he puts his guys in a position to succeed. And if he has a question, he asks it.
Mm-hmm.
And he also tries to make sure that coach and the general manager kind of get and their teams, all the scouts and all the coaches. He makes sure that they're grabbing dinner together, that they're They're getting to know each other as people. So it's not pointing fingers. Oh, it's the scout's fault. No, it's the coach's fault. No, that happens.
It's like the team. Yeah.
That happens in too. Yeah. And that's another thing. I think the bottom line is it's got to be whatever's best for the building. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't happen enough in the league. There's too many egos, too many people worried about their jobs. And instead of making a unified decision about what's best for the building, there's way too many other issues out there with the people running the teams. And
and that starts at the top, because you're only afraid of your job if that's the culture that's bred, that you have one season to make it do or die. You know what I mean?
It's just really hard, especially if you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, and if you don't have a quarterback and you win 4 or 5 games the first year, or, we went in there and inherited a 4-win team, and Derek Carr was the quarterback, and Derek was good enough to help you win games. He's not ever going to be considered a top 5 or 6 quarterback, a franchise quarterback, but John Gruden did a great job developing him and getting him playing at his highest level. It gave us a chance to build around him a little bit. And we went from 4 wins that we inherited to 7 to 8 to 10 and a wild card team.
In a playoff game.
But the thought process always had to be, how do you get better at that position? You got to have a Mahomes, a Jackson. Those are the guys that guarantee that you get a chance to compete and go for Super Bowls. So
do you think then, in that case, do you think that Mark Davis and Tom Brady are eyeing a Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders situation?
Well, they can't even control that because of where they're drafting right now.
I mean, don't you just move up or down or whatever?
It's easy to say, and people I tried to move down from the first draft pick I made, and I made a mistake with with Cleve Farrell, and I tried to move down, and nobody wanted to move up. So the fans always want to talk about moving down.
Like I just
why didn't you just move down? I tried for 2 months to move down, and then I tried to move up on draft day to draft Nick Bosa, and John Lynch laughed at me. So, and so the reality of what it is different than most people perceive.
Okay, interesting. So you don't want to go back to the Raiders. All right, cool. Let me just jump back real quick before we leave. The Packers-Eagles game. What's your prediction?
I think I've told you. I think the Eagles are a better team.
No, I mean win or lose.
What's that?
Win or lose. Like, is it going to be close? Not? What do you think?
So I think the Eagles are a better team. If they take care of the football and do what they normally do, they're going to have a solid win. If they start throwing interceptions or putting the ball on the ground or panicking, that's a different conversation. But I think they ought to go out and they ought to win a game by I don't know, by a touchdown. They're a better team.
Okay, cool. Well, I hope you're right.
You happy you got me rolling on the GM conversation, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's like you have a different perspective than a lot of people, so I like to hear it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but okay, thanks for hanging with me.
Always enjoy it, honey, and love you.
I'll see you again next week.
Okay.
Thanks, I love you.
You too.
Okay.